Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on Egypt's path of economic recovery. Now, last week we spoke about President Sisi's visit to the Paris summit. It was a two-day summit that focused mainly on Sudan and the African states, focusing mainly on the economic aspect of the whole continent and how the global community and the international community can help slash some of the debt that the African states are facing. Now, before we start doing that tonight, let's check out some of the main stories making the news today. And we'll start off with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi actually during his meeting with the Saudi Minister of Youth and Chairman of the Saudi Olympic Committee, Prince Abdulaziz bin Turki Al Faisal, on Tuesday. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi stressed on the significance of broadening cooperation between the two sides to exchange benefits from the experiences of youth and sports works and how to exploit them in investing the energies of youth and building effective youth community cadres. President Sisi praised the strong and the deep-rooted ties that bind the two brotherly nations in various domains. Presidential spokesman Bassam Radi said the meeting tackled ways to enhance cooperation between the two brotherly countries and exchange mutual benefits from youth work experiences of both nations. President Sisi welcomed the Saudi official in Cairo and conveyed his greetings to both His Majesty King Salman bin Abdulaziz and His Highness Saudi Crown Prince Mohamed bin Salman. The two sides reviewed the ongoing projects and various youth initiatives which are currently implemented by the government in various governorates, with President Sisi reiterating that Egypt pays a great attention towards youth and stressing the importance of sports practice to raise the level of public health for citizens at all ages. And President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received head of the African National Olympic Committee's Federation, ANOCA, Mustafa Braf, on Tuesday. Now, President al-Sisi welcomed the delegation of the Olympic Committee in Egypt, congratulating Braf on his election as its president and pointing to its important role in promoting interest in sports at the continental level. The head of state affirmed that Egypt has provided all means of support to hold the General Assembly of the African Olympic Committee in Cairo in light of current circumstances due to the corona pandemic. For his part, Braf praised Egypt's historical role as one of the African countries that excels in various sports. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassam Radi said Braf awarded President Sisi the Medal of Merit from the African Olympic Committee as one of the highest sporting merits in the African continent. And President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met with the visiting Qatari Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Sheikh Mohamed bin Abdulrahman al-Thani. The meeting was attended by Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri and Head of the General Intelligence Abbas Kamel, as well as the Qatari Head of State Security Abdullah al-Khalifi. These were the main stories making the news today, but now let's focus on last week. The President actually met at the Paris summit the Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, and we'll focus now on the cooperation and the partnership between Egypt and the IMF. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and starting off our discussion, let me welcome our guest, Dr. Mohamed Rushdy, the banking expert and a lecturer at Cairo University. Dr. Rushdy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank you and the Nile TV team for this kind invitation, and I would like to say good evening for our audience.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Rushdy, talking about the President's visit last week to Paris, attending the two-day summit regarding Sudan and the African economies. Now, on the sidelines, obviously, of the summit, he met with the Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, and they spoke about the cooperation and how Egypt has been really on the right path of the economic reform program. But first off, what would you say are the main topics on the agenda of their meeting between President Sisi and Georgieva?
Actually, I would like to start that the objective of this visit to support African nations hard hit by COVID-19 through doubling COVID-19 vaccination targets for Africa by the end of 2021. Under the COVAX vaccine sharing scheme, pursuing into IMF member states to triple actually so-called special drawing rights monetary reserves for Africa to $100 billion, and giving Africa the ability to produce and distribute COVID-19 shots, especially at homes. This is the main, I believe this is the main point for, or the objective for this visit.
Yes. Well, before we start delving into the importance and what the IMF promises, not just for Egypt, but also for the other African states, how would you describe the relationship of the nature of the cooperation between Egypt and the International Monetary Fund? I mean, over the past years, there was about the $12 billion loan from the IMF that was divided into 4 batches. How would you describe the relationship between Egypt and the IMF following the economic reform promises, lifting the austerities, the measures, all of these things?
Actually, there is a strategic relationship between Egypt and IMF. Actually, they are supporting the Egyptian economy through giving or lending us the acquired loans or grants that help to reform the economic and to build the infrastructure for our country, especially nowadays, as our audience and you know that our president and the government is investing in the infrastructure and mega projects that reflects positively on our GDP. As you know, Egypt is one of the most, what's called, it's one of the tiger countries that achieved GDP reached to 2%. Actually, this is a most important thing, and we are a potential country, as you know, that currently we consider Egypt, or European are consider Egypt as an emerging market, and this will be the future of the world.
Yes. Well, Egypt, as you've mentioned, is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and it really proved one of the very few countries that recorded positive GDP during the coronavirus pandemic. How is that possible, that the Egyptian economy actually records positive GDP when the whole world was affected by the pandemic and was hardly hit by the coronavirus pandemic all over the world, even the most developed countries?
Honestly, Egypt managed to maintain its economic performance despite the pandemic. I believe that the CBE, the Central Bank of Egypt, and the Monetary Policy Committee has played a vital role, which they played to cut the interest rate, deferring all customer credit dues for corporate, household, and SMEs, setting cash limit and facilitates the usage of electronic payments, adjusting the interest rate for CBE initiatives for tourism sectors, for SMEs, for mortgage, many initiatives, creating initiatives to support, as I told you and our audience, tourism, the initiatives also for non-performing companies and the individuals. And it was quite hard to balance between the health of people or our nation and the economic growth. This is it's called the difficult thing that the government succeeded to do it. This is mainly based on two main pillars: nation awareness, in addition to the precautions that the government took last year.
Yes. Well, Dr. Rushdy, now during the meeting between Kristalina Georgieva and President Sisi, she actually said that the IMF is looking forward to cooperate more with Egypt and really overcome economic challenges, and not just for Egypt but the whole of the African states. Now, how do you see the future or the potential cooperation between Egypt and the IMF? Would you say it would be a little bit different than our previous relationship? Are we going to get different sums of money? Are we going to have some sort of credibility at the IMF? Would they want to focus more on different kinds of projects other than infrastructure, or would they want to invest more in infrastructure?
In my humble opinion, the relationship with IMF will be totally different in the future. As you know, recently the credit institutions rated us as an positive B. Eventually, this is reflected on what we are doing currently, like Standard & Poor's. Many institutions or rating institutions, they give us the credibility for what we are doing, what the government is doing currently. Eventually, for the mega project, despite the fact that we have a pandemic, most of our sectors is still working. I know it's not working 100% of its capacity, but it's still working.
Yes.
Other countries, they lock down. This is a disaster on our economy. For that reason, we try to balance between eventually the health of people and the economic growth, which positively reflected on our GDP growth, and give the trust to the IMF, to our country, to mainly facilitate more grants or more loans in a short term, and at the same time it will be a positive signal for the investors to get more FDI.
Yes. Well, you've mentioned the good credit ratings that we're receiving, be it from the IMF, Standard & Poor's, Moody, all these financial institutions. Now, who benefits, or really who follows these ratings and really takes them into account? Is it just the governments or these financial institutions in how they're going to loan the money to Egypt, for instance? Or is it mainly focused and followed by the private investors and the multinational companies that are looking for more fertile soil to invest?
Actually, it's not excluded for the governments all over the countries. It's mainly the investors will take, they are taking a look on this. Actually, this is what happened last couple of years when our rating and our economy is stable. This was reflected actually based this is reflected on us. And by the way, I would like to add that the government didn't stop on that. They actually they established the new investment law, and they give incentive for two types of projects, A and B projects. And in addition to that, the special incentives that they give it to the investor or the additional investments. And this is covered in general in many industries like tourism, like infrastructure, in many food and beverage, energy. And one of our mega projects actually nowadays, which is the new capital, this is a huge investment. For that reasons, and the investment in the infrastructure actually. All of those investments, in addition to many things that the governments are doing, especially in terms of regulation, the new investment law and the new CBE law, central bank law, the law, as far as I recall, which is 194 for year 2020. All of those signals are giving a positive thing to the investors to come, and they are looking forward to come and invest in Egypt. By the way, as you know, our treasury bills and bonds, actually the interest rate, we have an inverted yield. That means, to clarify to our audience, that means the short-term return is higher than the long-term. Why we are doing that? Why the government is doing that? Actually, the government is doing that because on a short-term, Egypt has a potential economy and is a potential market. For that reason, we couldn't bear for long-term debt, despite the fact our economy will turn into a positive. For that reason, actually, we have an inverted yield curve, and the most of our investors are going and invest on those treasury bills and sovereigns mainly.
Yes. Well, you've mentioned how Egypt is actually working towards that future and also a long-term prosperity for the economy in general. Now, Georgieva actually really praised how the Egyptian economy has been going, calling it a role model, an example to be followed for the economic reform program that we've undertaken. Now, such a summit, it was talking about Sudan and the African states trying to cut down on the $600 billion of debt by 2023. Do you see that the model or the way that Egypt went about its own economic reform program can be followed by other African countries, or do you think that maybe other African countries have different sort of circumstances, different assets, different characteristics, different political and economic situation than in Egypt?
Actually, it sounds like a music to my ears that the ambassador and head of European Union delegate praised Egypt, said that Egypt's economy showed high resilience during COVID-19 crisis. During the speech, he explained that Egypt has successfully maintained macroeconomic and financial stability while safeguarding those who need it. He further called on the government to support small business to export. Actually, I believe in terms of our practice could be generalized in African country. This is a crucial thing. It depends. It depends on many things, which one of the factors, as you said, the political reason, the economic stability, the GDP structure, actually. There are some countries are focusing on petroleum, some countries are focusing on agriculture, some countries are focused on services. The mix of the GDP structure who can tell us what the model that they will apply it.
And with you following up all the developments that have been taking place here in Egypt and our GDP structure, now Egypt is really embarking on the energy field. We're talking about agriculture, we're talking about real estate, the new cities, the ICT, the technology. Which do you see also being in the banking business? Which sector do you see is the most, we can bet on?
Let me tell you something which will reflect on this. It's a joke that the people in USA are saying it after the pandemic. Who is leading the digital transformation in your company? Is it the CEO, the CTO, the COVID-19? The answer was just COVID-19.
Yes.
This is joke. Eventually, it will be an entrance to what is a potential industry that the government or the GDP structure should go for it. I believe the infrastructure will be on IT. IT because everything will be digitalized, especially as the majority of us are seeing now the government is taking initiative to spread the POS machine. They have initiative to double the POS machines in addition to issuing Visa card.
Yes.
Eventually, those things will transform us, will transform the country to digital transformation. Accordingly, the most important and pivotal thing nowadays to invest, which is the infrastructure in IT, to go for digitalization. For our GDP will be changed gradually. We will focus on services rather than agriculture or other
products.
Things. Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, talking about GDP, Egypt has recorded positive growth for the first quarter of the fiscal year 2021. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Egypt's GDP returns to growth in Q1 of FY 2021. Egypt's economy expanded 0.7% year-on-year in the first quarter of the fiscal year 2021, according to estimates released by the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development. The reading contrasted at 1.7% slump recorded in the fourth quarter of the previous fiscal year and marked a quick return to growth for the Egyptian economy. Domestically, private consumption held steady in the quarter, matching the 11.8% growth clocked in Q4, while fixed investment fell at a reduced rate, declining 41.8% in Q1. However, the government spending growth slowed to 3.4% in Q1, having boosted 14.0% higher in the prior quarter. In the external arena, exports fell by 41.1% in annual terms in Q1, softening from 48.5% plunged clocked in Q4. Recovering demand in key international markets amid milder lockdown conditions during the period likely drove the improvement. Meanwhile, imports dived 22.1% in Q1, moderating from Q4's 24.7% contraction. Going forward, the recovery is projected to gather pace throughout the remainder of the fiscal year of 2021, led by an improving external environment. However, the upswing in COVID-19 cases both domestically and in key international markets since the end of September 2020 and the associated reimposition of restrictions is likely to have held back activity in the second quarter of the fiscal year.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Rushdy. Picking up from where we left off, you've mentioned that one of the main sectors is the ICT, the information communication technology, talking about the digitalization process that the whole world and especially Egypt is undergoing. Does that mean, and you've just told me that a lot of these services are substituting already established companies. Does that mean that the small and medium enterprises, the startups, the entrepreneurs, are they having a larger slice of the economic cake now in Egypt?
I believe they will have a great opportunity. Do you know that there is something called TWAS analysis? What is TWAS analysis? Trust analysis is the abbreviation for threats, opportunities, weak, and strengths. Eventually, for many organizations nowadays or many countries, there is a threat. If you are not coping with the digitalization and the new infrastructure or the new, let me quote it as in the new world,
Yes.
that will be digitalized. Nowadays, we can see many shops. They are transforming their branches to be virtual branches. Accordingly, I'm talking about just the sector and the behavior for people and customers is totally changed. You believe? I believe that the only constant in this world is a change. This is my belief, and this is one of the famous philosophy called Heraclitus, who said it honestly. Yes, our world will be changed, and we have to have the vision nowadays to invest in infrastructure, and will be our way out to achieve the financial inclusion that positively will reflect on the economy. You know, if the umbrella we have here in Egypt, almost we can say that the majority of our economy is a gray economy, not under the umbrella of the government, and we are not taking taxes on it. Eventually, if we transfer this to be to the digital, and all payments should be digitalized nowadays, the government could be controlled and no money will be accepted from outside. According, this will lead to the financial inclusion. There's an initiative from the CBE that every citizen should have an account. You know, this will positively impact the economy, and it will the economy, and it will positively enhance our GDP growth.
And how long do you think it would take to actually reach that ultimate financial inclusion, really, and finish and conclude this whole digitalization process?
It's I will not say it's a tricky question, but it's like a challengeable question eventually. As you know, it's based on many factors, depend on many factors. One of those factors, the awareness of people and the efforts of the governments, and at the same time, the banking industry. Those things will lead to the financial inclusion, and those things, if they are those institutions, if they collaborated together, this will lead at the end to enhance our economic growth. And our country is, you know, we have a potential market. The majority of European and the other cities, they are investing nowadays in Egypt. Why they are doing that? This country is, it's called for them emerging market. We have our population mix. Eventually, the majority of our population mix, they are youth. We have a potential. Versus the European countries, the pyramid is inverted. Actually, the old people, they are the majority of the people. We have the manpower, the labor, the infrastructure. Nowadays, the government is trying to exert an effort and take loans from our IMF and different institutions to invest in it. In addition to all those factors, will lead to the financial inclusion and will get the FDI. In addition to, at the end, it will reflect at our GDP growth and economy.
Dr. Rushdy, I want to take you back to something that you've mentioned, the resilience of the Egyptian economy throughout the coronavirus pandemic. Now, you've mentioned that the Egyptian government focused on the infrastructure projects, also the national mega projects. How far have these mega projects helped with the resilience of the Egyptian economy during about a year and a half now of a severe pandemic?
Actually, I would like to answer this question to take some economic indicators that highlight that. For example, one of the most crucial things or most hot topics for years and years, which is FX rate. What the government did last 4 years, especially after the devaluation, actually it was quite hard for us to be that for short term, but the result nowadays we are harvesting part of those results. For example, the FX rate, it is stable. It's stable for almost 1 year. This is something we couldn't see that for many years ago. CBE rates changed based on the current circumstances and the inflation rate to support unemployment and inflation. Actually, it's also reflected on GDP growth that reached to 2%. Actually, the giant investment project implementation like energy and the new capital, which is reflected on the majority of industries like tourism, agriculture, manufacturing, many industries. All of those things which positively reflected on us.
Yes. Also, one of the very interesting things that took place last week in Paris was Egypt was vouching for Sudan. Egypt vouched for Sudan's credit at the IMF. It offered Egypt's loan credit at the IMF, which seemed that it was a very noble thing to do by Egypt for Sudan. How does this reflect not only on the Sudanese and the Egyptian economy, but also on how the whole international community and the IMF in specific view Egypt of actually vouching its own credit for Sudan?
As you know, there is a historical relationship between Egypt and Sudan. It's the natural extension.
Yes.
As we say it in Arabic,
Yes.
it's the natural extension for our country. We have a strategic relationship between us and Sudan, and believe me that currently Egypt is playing its normal role.
Yes.
If we return it back years ago, Egypt was influencer. She is playing a crucial and pivotal role on the Middle East and Africa. For that reason, I believe the relationship with Sudan will be different, and our view against the international, in front of the international organizations and the IMF, that we are leading, we are a leader, and we are influencer in the area. And this is counted for us, actually,
Yes.
and for the government.
Now, how do you see Egypt actually, I mean, yes, we've attended and we are playing a leading role within the summit that took place last week. But now we're also trying to help cut down $60 billion of debt for Sudan. We're trying to cut down on $300 billion for the rest of the African states. How can Egypt lend a helping hand to the African countries? How can Egypt lend its own know-how and expertise, because Egypt has been going through it for some time now? How can we help the other African countries?
In my humble opinion, actually what Egypt is doing now, we are trying to negotiate and doing our main role to negotiate and lead Africa by negotiating and requesting from the international organization to decrease the debt or decrease the interest rate for some debts. In addition to one of the most important thing that I believe that we will see in the future, which is the integration between Egypt and African countries. Nowadays, there are many financial institutions. Egyptian, let me tell you, financial institution in Egypt, they invested in Africa, and this is one of the most important direction that the President Sisi give to the government and the institution, that we have to build up our relation with Africa, and this is positively reflected on us.
Yes. Well, Egypt is going through its own plan to achieve the goal of sustainable development by 2030. Also, Africa is having the same goal to achieve by 2063. How do you see Egypt working to reach that goal in terms of projects? And you being in the banking business, do you see banks really focusing their investments and their strategies and direction to not just invest in traditional projects and traditional investments, but also looking far ahead, looking for sustainable development, looking for a greener economy? How do you see the country and the banking sector moving towards that goal?
I believe one of the government initiatives that concerning the sustainability in different sectors to reach by 2030, as far as I recall. This is one of our main objectives. Nowadays in banking sector, they are giving, especially CBE, they are giving their instruction to commercial banks to focus on SMEs. The SMEs, small and medium enterprise, I would like to just explain a little bit. Small and medium enterprises, those consider one of the main important pillars that any economy, if you would like to build a healthy economy, those are the main pillar for that. Why this? You have, when you are building anything, you have to diversify the economy. Like, for example, if you are investing, if you are an investor, you have ABC investment, you have to diversify your portfolio. As you shouldn't put the egg in one
basket.
Basket, Eventually, the SMEs will be one of the crucial things to build up the economy. As you know, those initiatives from to support SMEs and to support in mega projects, those will positively reflected on our economy and will push up the economic wheel going forward for Egypt.
Yes. And the banking sector now, if they are supporting and focusing on the SMEs, do you always favor certain SMEs investing or trying to establish their own business in different sectors, be it online technology, providing services for agriculture, or providing services for education or health, or what sort of SMEs would you have if you have a variety of SMEs? And you would want to loan one, which sector would you always say, yeah, this probably is much more promising?
Actually, we have a lot on our plate eventually, but we have to set our priorities.
Yes.
As you said, you hit a nerve. You said the first thing, which is the IT. Eventually, the IT and the initiative from the individual initiative to prepare applications or youth to empower the youth to do business. Those are one of the most important things that the CBE and the banks are focusing on. And for that reason, the CBE initiated the SMEs project to finance them with a lower interest rate, by the way. But if we are setting our priorities nowadays, we will talk about IT and strategic industries like agriculture, industries, and tourism.
Dr. Rushdy, now, Egypt's forecast for the GDP for the current fiscal year 2021-2022, it's forecast a growth of 6%. That's almost a 3% rise. How realistic is such a forecast, and do you see Egypt actually making that 3% leap in this current year, keeping in mind that the rest of the global economy are starting to get back on their feet, they're lifting some of the restrictions, the vaccinations are underway, so different economies around the world will be picking up pace as well?
Actually, I would like to take you through an economic model which called Love W model. Which is Love W model? The scientists, after the pandemic, they are thinking what's the pattern that will happen for the economy after the pandemic. Actually, they were expected that it will be W model. What is W? W, which is mean that the economic there will be a slowdown eventually, and it will return up a little bit for the W, and then it will slow down with the second and third wave, and it will return back gradually. For that reason, there is a great potential for the economy all over the world. Here in Egypt, despite the fact that during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have a greater challenges, and we achieved 2%, almost 2% GDP growth. So eventually, we will double this number.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Hopefully so. Well, one last question, because we're running out of time now. With the rest of the global economy getting back on its feet, would you say that this will even help Egypt show a greater growth in its GDP, or will it constitute some sort of an economic competition now? We're not the only country that is having a healthy rebound from the COVID-19. Will it help the Egyptian economy, or will it create some sort of a competition for the Egyptian economy?
Actually, I don't like to say it looks like a competition. The world, we have globally to integrate. Every country has its competitive edge, and they are specialized on industry or agriculture or many stuff eventually. Here in Egypt, we have a competitive edge in terms of we have the manpower. Actually, we have the manpower and the youth, and we could do many things with the manpower. If you want to change the world eventually with the manpower, in addition to we are investing in the infrastructure and the IT. This is a new world in my humble opinion. Accordingly, I believe that it will be kind of integration between us, Africa and Europe. For sake of Europe, for example, they have to invest in Africa because this is the emerging market. They are selling their products. If they don't have this market, they will not sell it. And at the same time, we are selling for them other products. They are not specialized to do it or to manufacture it.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on that very hopeful note, as Dr. Rushdy mentioned, there is a lot to be hopeful for. We are witnessing a growth of GDP, and hopefully we will witness more growth. Hopefully things are getting better. The banking sector, the digitalization process, the financial inclusion, the mega projects, a lot of good indicators that it's not just only felt here in Egypt, but also a lot of the international financial institutions such as the IMF and Standard and the S&M and Moody's. All of these things are really praising the the economic development that Egypt is going through. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Mohamed Rushdy, the economic and banking expert and the lecturer at Cairo University. Dr. Rushdy, it was a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to me to attend this nice discussion today with you and Nile TV team and our audience.
Thank you very much, sir. Always a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.